lovelies, welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. I hope you're well and taking care of yourself however that looks for you. So today is a very exciting day because it's our first proper video back on YouTube. And we're going to look at something that's not only talked about a lot in my content over on Instagram and TikTok and wherever, but something that is such a talking point across the culture. And that is beauty standards. Now if you follow me, you might know I have a lot to say about this topic and I can literally talk about it for days. But don't worry, I won't, because I know you'll definitely be bored of my voice by then. No, today I want to talk more strictly about why we actually have certain beauty standards. And what is it they're actually trying to achieve? I became a disabled woman at 21, and in those 6 years, I really been on a journey of deconstructing my idea of what beauty actually is. I used to be a very self-conscious person, and I've really struggled with disordered eating in my past. But now I'm in a place where I can look at it more analytically, and I realised that beauty standards are literally just completely made up. But I want to understand why they were made up in the first place, who sets them, and why they change so much over time. And as a little history geek, I think it's important to look back at our past, as it helps us to really understand the present. So that's what we'll be doing today, using history to help us understand how the rich have set and shaped the culture that still molds beauty standards today. I'm really excited to be back on YouTube. I know there's probably a mixture of you guys here who watched me before, but there's also probably a lot of you who didn't even know that I probably did YouTube. But it feels nice to be back doing topics like this that mean a lot to me and that I'm really passionate about. But I don't want to mess around, I want to get straight into the topic, so I'll just say like, subscribe if you like this type of content, and I'll hopefully speak to you in the comments. Now, although they may feel more intense than ever, with our attention being directed at the impacts of social media and filters, and even a retrospective look on the language used around bodies and celebrities in the early noughties, beauty standards are definitely not a new thing. I feel like we're maybe just actively more aware of it and we're studying the impacts of it now. For example, one study showed that in the UK, 85% of girls have distorted the way they look online by age 13, which is obviously a really scary statistic. And it does propose questions about the safety and the mental health of girls online, and we should absolutely be taking that seriously. But what I also think is dangerous is the narrative that this pressure was just born with social media and Photoshop or even magazines, because that's just simply not true. They are sewn into the very fabrics of our society and upheld by capitalism, patriarchy, and even racism. So to almost blame social media, in my opinion anyway, is very reductive. And it almost completely disregards the question of where are these beauty standards actually coming from? Well, in short, no one's surprised, it's the rich. In a capitalistic society, the elite set the beauty standards. Influenced by the socio-political culture of the time, it is actually a tool for them to establish social distinctions and hierarchies. And I think keeping the narrative reductive serves to benefit those who set the standards. If we are pinning the problem on the individual's consumption of media, it almost puts like a cloak of invisibility over the real answers. And they are rooted deeply in capitalism, patriarchy, and even racism. And we're going to get into that. I personally just think we can do more than make comparisons to the golden era of Hollywood. You know, it's a time period which is so glamorized with beautiful pictures of Marilyn Monroe and like other curvy physiques. And you see a lot of rhetoric online of people just almost being like, good then, bad now. But I think we can actually learn a lot more by going further back and studying the roots. Right, so disclaimer, every good YouTube video comes with one. There is obviously only so much that like I can cover in one YouTube video, and even this has taken like weeks of prep and research. So this is going to focus just on Western beauty standards, specifically because of the points in history that we're going to talk about and the modern day references that we're going to make. But I do know if we're talking globally, there's a lot more to the conversation, but you don't want to hear me talk for that long. So it might shock you to learn that in ancient Greece, men were actually held to a higher standard of beauty than women were. But that is literally because the ancient Greeks literally worshipped the male form, and they did just think women were disfigured versions of men. I know there's so much going on there, I can't. But even though we were just disfigured versions of men, there was still an ideal woman. And that woman would look plump, full-bodied, and have light skin. And what I think is quite interesting there is the attention to the fuller body. Because if a woman was built that way, it meant she had plenty of access to food and was thus wealthy. And the elite have long used food as a signifier of status. In fact, it's so well known, it's almost become like a trope or a part of pop culture. Like, as I'm saying it, I bet you're imagining like a medieval king, a long table, eating chicken off the bone while there's just a place before him. Honestly, it's a little bit like what my dinner times look like here, because I cannot eat without watching YouTube. It's just a medieval urge, I think, that is ingrained in me. And the reason why it's kind of ingrained into pop culture now is because it actually spans beyond BC. And we're going to come forward in time now to the Italian Renaissance, which is probably actually one of the most famous times in history for depicting women's bodies. You know, there was an abundance of art. It was literally the Renaissance and people were starting to explore bodies. A lot of us have grown up seeing images like this one, or sculptures of women, and you have a certain idea in your head of what that is when you say the word Renaissance. Much like how women were attached to the identity of a man in ancient Greek, not much had changed in the Italian Renaissance. And it was actually the duty of a wife to reflect her husband's status, not just through her behaviour, but through her body and her appearance, which again allows you to see that link between beauty and wealth. The ideal woman having a rounded stomach, wide hips, fair skin and ample bosom, which I don't know why it makes me laugh when I say that. I'm literally a child. Yes, I love history and serious topics, but more than that, I love boobs. But it is once again about displaying that proximity to wealth and indicators of wealth. Indicators of beauty are less about what's actually like appealing to the eye and more about what they indicate in terms of social and political and economic status. Pierre Bourdieu, a French sociologist, supports these claims with his analysis that the higher class are constantly working to differentiate themselves from the lower classes. Also, I'm really sorry if I've said his name wrong. I'm really sorry. Pierre is renowned in the field of sociology, and more specifically, his study into the sociology of aesthetics. And he's really the guy for this topic because he has achieved wide influence in this very specific field. And Pierre says that the elites actually achieve this differentiation by cultivating tastes, diets, and physical appearances that are in opposition to subordinated groups. And it's with these social distinctions that social hierarchies can then be naturalised and normalised. And there are some very recent examples of this in action in society, and you're probably thinking of a few right now. But we will come to the modern day a little bit later, but we've got a little bit more history to get through first. And to get a little bit deeper into it, we're going to leave the Italian Renaissance now, and we are going to swim all the way across to England, more specifically Elizabethan England. The first one, not the reprise. I mean, George R. R. Martin really did make a good point, because why do the monarchs all just be having the same name, you know? Right, now Queen Elizabeth I. She had a famous love for sugar, so much so that her court produced her lavish desserts made with sugar paste, but that looked like savoury food, like bacon and eggs and that sort of stuff. And not only was it used in their desserts, it was also used to brush their teeth. Yeah, I know. I would love to just show Elizabeth I's veneers and just watch her like pass out. That would probably what I'd do if I got a time machine. But yes, Elizabeth I, literally the Willy Wonka of the 1500s, except she had an even worse dad. But unlike Willy Wonka, it wasn't simply the taste of sugar that sparked this frenzy. It was the social and economic implications that came with it. Like today, the majority of us could probably right now go to a local shop, go to a supermarket or even a vending machine and have access to a sugary treat. But back in the reign of Elizabeth I, sugar was a really costly import that only the elites could really afford. And so it became a status symbol. And it wasn't just the food itself that became associated with wealth, but the impact food like that has on your body. I mean, Elizabeth I herself had such bad teeth that by the end of her life, most people couldn't actually really understand her when she talked. And this is why I think Americans think English people have really bad teeth. I've heard what some of you Americans be saying about us. I hear it. A lot of people might have said like, oh, well, they might not have been aware of the impacts on their health at that time, but that's actually really undermining Tudor intelligence, if you will. They at least knew that sugar had some effect on teeth because Elizabeth I's rotting teeth became an aesthetic in itself. But don't worry, if you couldn't afford the lavish price of rotting your own teeth, you could blacken your teeth with makeup, which is something that those who didn't have access to sugar used to do. So what exactly happened? How did we get from fuller, plumper bodies and rotting teeth being the standard to the standard that we have today? Well, unsurprisingly, it involves one of the darkest periods in history, and that is the transatlantic slave trade. And I'm going to give a little trigger warning here that we are going to be lightly touching on racism, colonialism and the slave trade. The slave trade did make sugar more available throughout England, to the point where even those who lived in small towns outside of the city could access it now. It had become loved and welcomed by all, and so it was no longer desired by the few. And by the mid-17th century, even small towns had shops that sold sugar, which meant that it lost its cachet amongst the wealthy. But beyond that, English people were starting to be exposed to the African people that they were enslaving and their body type. And obviously the history is long, but it's important to note that England didn't actually participate in the slave trade during its first century, but by the late 16th century, it had become the global dominant power in the business. So as opposed to our slave trade partners over in Venice, who almost had like a honeymoon phase with the Africans they were enslaving. It sounds so disgusting, but because they had that so exposed to it and they were so more used to being around Africans, it was a very different reaction to what it was here in England. And England very quickly began to liken blackness to unattractiveness. And a key thought in creating this perception was the first racial classification system in the Western world. It's written by Francis Bonner. I'll write it on the screen and you can tell me whether this is right. I mean Francois Bonner. So it's written by Francois Bonner, and it was shared amongst English intellectuals. thus helping to birth a stereotype that black people were sexually and orally indulgent, and that they were freely gratifying these animal appetites. These texts, alongside the ethnographic freak shows and of course the accelerating slave trade, encouraged the degradation of black women and the discipline of white women. Now, the impact and the fallout from that period in history can really be seen in Victorian England, otherwise known in media anyway as the era of the corset. Of course, corsets is a really hard sentence to say. I try and say it now 5 times quickly. It's really hard. Of course, corsets did exist before Victorian England. Got there. During that time period that they became more exaggerated and more waist cinching. Less like a stay and more of like a proper corset that you're thinking of, because not all corsets are like the ones that were worn in Victorian England. Now, slavery might have been abolished in 1807, although the slaves in the colonies weren't freed until 1838, may I add. That is not the end of the slave trade's impact on beauty standards. The contempt and disgust for black people and their bodies have been well ingrained into the people. And because fatness had become so intrinsically linked to blackness, it's arguably more desirable than ever at this point anyway to achieve thinness. And with this came a lot of dangerous health fads and diets. And you might think, oh, okay, not much has changed. But governmental regulation of anything health related didn't actually exist in England until 1906. So some of these diets got really crazy and really scary, including patent medicines that had like outlandish claims and dangerous ingredients. And by the way, it was also these claims that were the main source of revenue for newspapers. Other diets included swallowing a tapeworm larvae, drinking a dose of arsenic poisoning, or wearing rubberized corsets and underwear. Oh, and of course, not to forget drinking vinegar to kill the appetite. The image of wealth had clearly changed drastically, and so had the image of beauty. Thinness, restraint, and discipline. These were now the indicators. Today it's been about 130 years or so since the Victorian era, and I really hope I got that math right. And while specific trends may come and go very fast, the thin ideal has stayed pretty consistent, although maybe more extreme in some decades. For example, in the 1920s saw the trend of actually flat chest and a more boyish type figure. The 1930s actually kind of reintroduced the curvy ideal a little bit, but then in the 1960s we saw the rise of thinness again. And then that stayed pretty consistent actually really until the 2010s. And obviously during that time we saw the famous heroin chic style of the 90s, which is probably the thing that a lot of you instantly think of when you say thin ideal, because that time period is just so famous for its thinness. Like, it was so at the forefront of culture. Sorry, my battery died. But yes, I'm 26, so I could literally do an entire video of what it's like growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, and like, just like the language around body in that time, it was like wild. And I know so many women in my generation are like permanently scarred from that era. But yeah, in the 2010s, we saw the rise of the Kardashians. And I'm sorry if any of you guys are fans of them, but I don't really want to talk about them any more than I have to, because I like to not let them have too much space in my brain. But it cannot be denied the impact that they, and particularly Kim, have had on beauty standards and pop culture as a whole for like more than a decade now as well. And they really kind of propelled that beauty standard of hourglass, but flat stomach and big boobs and big bum and a fag. And the irony that we have gone from talking about the slave trade's impact on beauty standards to now the Kardashians co-opting and building entire empires, moulding themselves on black women, is not lost on me. And Kim was actually kind of applauded in her early rise to fame for normalising that curvy physique. But I think over time we've really come to the realisation that bodies like that, as a whole, generally, for most people, are not attainable without assistance. I'm not saying or implying anything. According to Cosmopolitan magazine, BBLs have increased by 90% from 2015 to 2019. Even though it's literally one of the most dangerous cosmetic procedures you can have, it has become so normalised in our culture. Beauty is now curvy, but still thin, and tan, but still white. And what makes this time period really different is now not only did we have exposure to the beauty standard, but we have the models of beauty showing us exactly how they achieve it. Just like how diet advertising was a main source of revenue for newspapers in Victorian England, it has grown into a $1 billion industry today. And that industry has helped to fund empires like the Kardashians. Whether it is the waist trainers, the laxative teas, or the diet plans, or even just their image, they want to sell you just enough so that you buy into it. But they can't give you everything you want, because then what are you going to spend your money on? If you achieved your dream body tomorrow, if you woke up with it, and you didn't have to pour your hard-earned money into diet culture and to diet industry, who is going to fund these empires? That's why, even though fitness has always been kind of at the core of the ideal, the specifics of the ideal seem to sort of shape-shift every 10 years or so. And we are bang on time for a shift again. It's already happening. And it seems to be scarily resembling the heroin chic trend that we saw in the 1990s. There has been a rise in a number of celebrities, including the Kardashians, slimming down. And I don't know, maybe it has something to do with BBLs becoming so popularised and more accessible. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe it is history repeating itself. While beauty may be at its core appearing wealthy, it is also now about generating wealth for those who perpetuate it. Like, we often laugh when we look back at history at some of the things they did in the name of health. But do you really think in 100 years to now, people aren't going to be laughing at us for drinking laxative tea because a rich lady with nice photos sold it to us with a discount code? No, they probably will laugh because it is so ridiculous, but it has become naturalised and normalised, just like how it was naturalised and normalised to paint your teeth black. Look, if we've learned anything today, it's that the history of beauty standards is long, and it's also deep-rooted in a lot of painful history, such as the slave trade. And it doesn't really show any signs of stopping anytime soon. Look, we've just seen that shift and sort of the start of heroin chic creeping back in. And it clearly is so much bigger than all of us, me and you. But because these things are so deeply ingrained into us from a young age, it can feel so hard to break from them. And as a woman, it kind of feels like we're fighting against what history has given us. But if you've learned anything from today, I hope that you take away that everything is literally made up. That was literally one of the most freeing realizations for me, like when I realized that we're literally just on a floating rock and a load of men actually wrote all of these standards, and not only did they write them and we have to live by them, they then now profit off them. The next time you find yourself feeling self-conscious or desiring something, really ask yourself, why do I feel that way? That's something that has really helped me anyway, being able to trace back the thoughts, intrusive thoughts that I'm having, and trace it back and really get to understand, why do I want that? Why do I feel like I need that? And unfortunately, we are kind of really ingrained into the system from such a young age that when you start to have those realizations, it is a complete deconstruction of the world around you and how you've grown to understand it. But it is so worth it. Ooh, that was a little bit deep, didn't it? Right, so that's it from me today. I'm going to end this video here. I hope you guys enjoyed, you know, all that good YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, comment, only if it's nice. If it's mean, I'll cry. So if you're going to leave a mean comment, don't. But yeah, it's really good to be back, and I'm really excited about what other videos and topics we can deconstruct this year.